as those that were listed. The implications of these it was also revealed same views, examples of deception and misrepresentation that has recently been revealed involves the attempts of high-level officials of our government to conceal the extensive bombing in Cambodia in 1969 and 1970. The Secretary of State of the United States testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee that Cambodia is one country, he said, where we can say with complete assurance that our hands are clean and our hearts are pure. However, with the knowledge and approval of officials at the highest level, at that very time, and over a period of 14 months, American B-52 secretly flew over 3,600 missions into Cambodian territory. These missions were only kept secret from the American people and Congress in the anticipation of the widespread public outcry that would arise against further involvement in the internal affairs of the Asian governments. I do not purport to know whether it was right or wrong to bomb Cambodia. My point has to do solely with deception and double dealing by government officials. Keeping a bona fide military secret is one thing. Falling into the habit of keeping the truth from the American people, I submit to you, is another thing. I say to you that these and similar actions have served to undermine confidence in the integrity of the American leaders. I believe in this country. I believe in its form of government. I still believe, idealistically perhaps, that the people with leadership from the legal profession can stem the flow. But in order to do so, there must be an awareness of our problems. There must be an awareness of our ills. The cloak of secrecy which shrouds so much of government at every level must be lifted. Now, these examples of dishonesty and misrepresentation are more than a group of isolated events. They seem to reflect a recurrent pattern of conduct throughout our system of government. Lying and deception have become accepted options. They have become accepted options to be weighed along with other alternatives in selecting a course of conduct. Now let me briefly summarize what I consider to be some of the most egregious examples of this lack of integrity. At the very least, there appears to be a pattern, I emphasize the word pattern, there appears to be a pattern of nonfeasance, or more likely in a considerable number of instances, malfeasance at all levels of our government. In many instances, this has resulted in outright corruption and a blatant disregard for the interest of the general public and for the processes of the law. Examples of improper conduct by officials of municipalities, both large and small, are legion. We receive reports in the media every day of these instances. A new report of some illegal activity or some improper influence in the assignment of local government contracts and construction projects is uncovered practically every week. Many of our major municipalities are controlled by leaders who openly abuse the authority of their office. For others, corruption and cronyism are merely standard operating procedures. Similarly, too many state officials often appear to be dominated by individuals intent on advancing their own personal or financial interest, either along with or, if necessary, in spite of the urgent needs of the state. Programs of reform are stalled, and committees, as legislators, proudly take credit for the introduction of new bills, while privately guaranteeing their defeat to those whose special interest would be harmed by the bill's adoption. Let me emphasize this. I'm not just talking about Alabama, but practically every state in our union, we find this situation existing. However, a prime example of what I am talking about presently exists right here in the state of Alabama, There is no excuse, in my judgment, for the failure of the Alabama legislature to pass an ethics bill which would prevent legislators from sponsoring bills in which they have a personal interest. Several recent examples of dishonesty and duplicity at the highest levels of the federal government also illustrate this striking pattern. I make no judgment, and I emphasize this, I make no judgment at this point as to the criminality of any individual in the Watergate affair. I've been on the bench too long to make judgments on the basis of media reports. I would also emphasize to you that it appears that similar activity has been going on at the instance of the leaders of officials of both major political parties for years. However, Watergate itself, aside from the question of any possible subsequent cover-up, if there was, admittedly involved, the attempted burglary of the offices of one of the nation's leading political parties. That such a scheme could be seriously entertained, much less attempted, by high political officials is in itself a staggering admission. Also, it's literally incomprehensible to me that the acting head of the Federal Bureau of Investigation would willfully destroy material documents because of their potential political harm. This pattern reaches through the highest levels of our government. For example, the President's closest and perhaps most influential assistant has attempted to justify the eavesdropping on the private lives of public officials, the burglary of the files of a private physician, and much more under the guise of national security. Admittedly now, and I emphasize this also, there are no bright lines that demarcate the President's executive power to protect our nation's security, and there shouldn't be. But lest we surpass all totalitarian regimes of the past, there must be some point at which national security ceases to be a permissible justification for questionable and on the surface completely domestic activities. Certainly, there must be some real threat to the very core of our governmental processes before the full panoply of national security machinery is legitimately operative.
Coal gasification is an old process based on the peculiar practice of mixing fire and water at high pressure. The important thing is to do it at not too high expense. The concrete proposal is to find deep underground deposits at 1,000 feet, at 2,000 feet, loosen them up by many small explosions, conventional explosions, just to open up some spaces. They will be hardly felt on the surface. Pump down oxygen, set it on fire, pour water over it, which will exercise the right pressure. You can get out of this, we believe, something like 85% of the heating value of coal in a cheap way, in a clean way, in the form of gas consisting of hydrogen and methane, little carbon monoxide. I think it is a really hopeful process, and I think it could make a considerable contribution to the solution of the energy crisis. And there are a few states, very particularly Wyoming and Alabama, where the resources for this kind of process are just right.
Dr. Teller, have you discussed the possibility of developing coal gasification with officials here in the state of Alabama?
I am very grateful to the Governor Wallace, who listened to the possibility, paid close attention, and I'm deeply impressed by the expertise of his advisor in these matters, Phil Lamoureux, I hope that real progress will be made in Alabama.
Now then, what would you propose, what action do you feel should be taken in more or less some of this prevention you're talking about?
When I say there is no law in Alabama, I'm saying there is no statute. There is court case law, which courts have held that the teacher stands in loco parentis, which simply means as a substitute parent, and as a substitute parent can administer reasonable punishment and can exact discipline from a child. Now, the statutes, of course, are silent on this point. Teachers are not told either to punish by use of the paddle or not to punish. It's left in the realm of discretion. I think it's going to be incumbent upon local school boards and parent groups, PTAs and other advisory groups to work with teachers in the development of a climate that's conducive to learning. Too often in the past, I suppose, it's been left up to the teacher to maintain discipline in her individual classroom, and of course it's still going to be primarily her function. But I think there needs to be developed a climate and a support for the teacher in this regard. Many school boards now say to the teacher, rather than resorting to the paddle, then send the child to the office and a temporary suspension of the child, or the child's parents will be called in for a conference. There are many other techniques available other than the use of the paddle. And I think the teachers are going to have to expect some support out of the parents in taking these other approaches.